Good day, students. Today we shall be talking about regulation of internal environment, which we can also call homeostasis. So, what do we mean by homeostasis? The simple unicellular organisms, when I say unicellular organisms, I mean organisms that have just one cell. They live in an aquatic environment, so they depend on the external environment for survival. Whatever happens inside the cell is determined by the outside environment. But in vertebrates are higher organisms that have, most of them are multicellular organisms that have backbone. Those cells that we're talking about now exist in the internal environment of the body, whose chemical composition and temperature do not vary drastically. So there's a way these vertebrates maintain internal environment. They maintain a constant internal environment, and that is what we call homeostasis. So we say that in maintaining a constant internal environment, some things are very important. Some organs are very important. We have the lungs, the kidney, the liver, the skin, and the endocrine gland. Some textbook we talk about the brain, but I'm not going to include the brain here. But when I talk about endocrine gland, we will talk about the part of the brain that controls production of hormones and eventually regulates homeostasis. So the overall control of homeostasis process is carried out by the brain, like I've said. So I'm not going to include the brain there, but the brain performs a major function of controlling and governing these homeostatic processes. So let's talk about the lungs first. We talked about the lungs in our previous classes when we talked about respiration. We know that it's a major organ that releases waste, and the major waste that it releases is carbon dioxide, water, and nitrogenous substance. So the lungs control levels of oxygen intake and carbon dioxide output. It is very essential in doing that. So this is the diagram of the lungs, and these are the parts of the lungs. And the alveoli that is enlarged here is where we have absorption. It is very rich in blood vessels. So we have diffusion of oxygen into the blood vessels, and which is exchanged with carbon dioxide that is released as waste out of the body. So we've done this when we talk about respiration. So, and this is one organ that also performs internal regulation by releasing the waste carbon dioxide out of the body and control the influx of oxygen into the body. The kidney is another organ that we really need to understand, though we've also talked about it when we talked about excretion. But the essential function of the kidney is into two parts. Apart from the fact that it can excrete nitrogenous waste, it also performs the function of osmoregulation. So I want us to note these two homeostatic function of the kidney. One, excretion of nitrogenous waste, and two, osmoregulation functions. So the kidney is supplied with blood containing oxygen and nitrogenous waste. In the kidney, the nephron processes the nitrogenous waste to form urine, which is excreted out of the body. So we have the basic unit, the functional unit of the kidney to be the nephron, which performs the most function of the kidney. So in the kidney, the nephron turn all the waste that is being channeled into it into urine. So that urine has the major waste, the urea, that is being excreted out of the body. This is the major, this is a diagram of the kidney. The kidney is like bean shape. There is two in every vertebrate, and it is connected to the bladder through the ureter, and the bladder leads out to the body through the urethra. So we have the right kidney, we have the left kidney. A person can live well with one kidney. Inside this kidney, you have thousands of nephrons that process our waste into urine. So the urine is being collected, the urine that is being produced in this kidney is being collected through this ureter into the bladder. So the function of osmoregulation is another function that is being carried out by the kidney, apart from excretion of waste, which we have talked about urea as one of the major waste. Now, the maintenance of constant osmotic pressure in the fluid of an organism is done by the control of water and salt concentration. So that is, it involves water balance. The way the kidney perform the function of osmoregulation is one, by water balance, two, control of pH, three, control of sodium ions. Those three things are key. We need to understand those three things when we want to understand osmoregulation. Let's start with water balance. Now, the water balance and the body fluid is controlled by the solute concentration of the body. What do I mean by the solute concentration? I mean the salt intake. Like, the solute concentration can be raised when the body takes too much salt and drink very little water. So the solute concentration will increase. Note that when there is too much salt in the food intake and there's very little water, so when these are combined with profuse sweating, maybe during hot temperature, the osmotic pressure is reached. Then the increase in osmotic pressure is detected by osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus. I'm going to mention hypothalamus more because it has to do with the part of the brain that see to these osmostatic processes. So it is the hypothalamus, which is a part of the brain that quickly recognize that there is an increase in osmotic pressure. Once it detects the increase in osmotic pressure, then the receptors will send impulses to stimulate increase in the release of antidiuretic hormone. I hope you remember that we have mentioned this antidiuretic hormone when we talk about how the kidney process the urine. So the antidiuretic hormone in the blood now cause the increase in reabsorption of water. You know that there is an increase in osmotic pressure because the salt intake is high, the water intake is low. So the body needs to retain more water. So what the antidiuretic hormone is, a type of hormone that we will still talk about later during this presentation. So it helps, it increase reabsorption of water from the tubules into the body fluid so that the body will not be dehydrated. That is how the kidney helps water balance. And by the time the body reabsorb more water, you will see that the resulting urine becomes concentrated or turbid. That is when you see that you have a very thick yellow urine because the necessary water has been absorbed by the body. Because there is high salt intake, there is low water intake, and maybe during a very sunny weather. You understand? So the body needs to retain more water to help to prevent against dehydration. So in that case, you will see that the resulting urine becomes turbid. Then as the osmotic pressure is regulated, the process can also be reversed. If the osmotic pressure is low, the antidiuretic hormone will not be released so that the lot of water can pass out in the urine. So water balance is one of the way the kidney perform its osmoregulatory function. Another way is the control of pH. The normal pH of blood is 7.4, which is slightly alkaline. We know that when it is less than 7, it is acidic. On 7, it is neutral. Above 7, it is alkaline or basic. So when it is slightly more alkaline, the distal tubule excretes hydrogen carbonate ion to reduce the pH. So by the time maybe the kind of food we eat or the kind of drug we eat can increase the alkalinity of blood. So when the blood is more alkaline than the required pH, then the body will secrete hydrogen carbonate ions. Hydrogen carbonate ions to reduce pH. So the concentration of sodium ion in the blood can also be regulated. Sodium ions is also regulated. When it is high, then the excess is excreted in the tubules. So if it's lower, then the sodium ion is reabsorbed at the distal tubules by the secretion of a type of hormone from the adrenal cortex, which is called aldosterone. So that helps to regulate reabsorption of sodium ion. These are the function of the kidney, how it performs its osmoregulatory function. Okay, so this is the diagram of the kidney. This is the cross-sectional area. This is the internal structure. This is the unit, the functional unit that I talked about, the nephron, starting from the Bowman capsule to the convoluted tubule to the collecting ducts. It is also enlarged here. So we have talked about this. This is how the urine is formed when the blood vessels, this is called the glomerulus, which are channels of blood vessels. So when the blood is being brought into the kidney, the Bowman capsule, which is this, performs the function of ultrafiltration. So that ultrafiltration selectively reabsorbs some filtrates with smaller molecules into the tubules. So some filtration is just like separation of so filtration is like separation of solid from the liquid. So some filtrates are reabsorbed into the tubules here. Glucose, minerals, and some others pass into the filtrate and they are being reabsorbed at the proximal convoluted tube. This side is the proximal convoluted tube. This is the loop of Hell or Ellis loop. Then this is the distal convoluted tube and this is the collecting duct. So there are reabsorptions. Now, this loop of Hell and the distal convoluted tube, they are the major sites for reabsorption of water. Like we said that the osmoregulation is done here. Absorption of water, regulation of pH, and control of sodium ion. So most of those things they are done at the loop of Hell or at the distal convoluted tube. Now let's talk about kidney disease. The failure of the kidney to function properly due to disease, poison, or physical injury can lead to accumulation of urea. I mentioned urea as one of the important wastes that need to be channeled out of the body. So the kidney is the one that processes the urea into urine. So when there is accumulation of this urea, then the blood becomes toxic and that can lead to a very serious consequences. That could be because of a disease or because of a poison or there's a physical injury. There are different types of kidney diseases. The few ones that we'll talk about here, let's start with nephritis. There are different types, but the common one is the glomerulonephritis, which I will call the inflammation. Inflammation is like a swelling, inflammation of the glomeruli. We talk about the glomerulus when we talk about the Bowman capsule when I showed you the structure of the nephron. So the inflammation of the glomeruli due to a bacteria, the streptococci bacteria, will result into extreme permeability of the glomerulus. I said the glomerulus and the Bowman capsule performs the function of ultrafiltration, that is filtering very small molecules. They only allow very small molecules. But by the time it is infected with this streptococci bacteria, then it becomes extremely permeable. Look at a healthy kidney, you can say, and this is an inflammatory glomerulus. So this is a disease condition. This is one of the disease of the kidney, which will cause serious pain, abdominal pain, and antibiotics could be taken to redeem the situation. Another kidney disease is kidney stone. When water intake is low and the salt intake is high, The urine is abnormally acidic or alkaline. Then the mineral salts in the urine crystallize out, especially when you've taken a lot of we said that when salt intake is high, the body regulates it by reabsorbing some water so that the urine become turbid. So when you have that turbid urine and it's stayed in this is the bladder, is where the urine is stored. It stays in the bladder. Remember that this ureter connects to the kidney. I've already showed you the diagram before. So when the urine stays a long time in the kidney, the urine can crystallize out as solid, forming a stony mass. Look at it. The minerals in the urine crystallizes out as solid mass of stone, preventing the flow of urine. You can see that the subsequent urine that is coming here is being blocked, and you can have this mass of stones in the kidney too. So this is kidney stone. It can be removed by surgery, or an infected person consults a physician for the next action. So another disease is the diuresis, and this condition happens when the kidney filters too much bodily fluid. The kidney is released, the hypothalamus as stimulates the gland to release more ADH, antidiuretic hormone. So the kidney absorbs lots of water. The kidney could not absorb lots of water, so it filters lots of water out. So the urine becomes more. The person urinates all the time, and that will lead to dehydration of the body because the kidney cannot retain any water. You can see that it's leaking out water. It's leaking out water. That is diuresis. The antidiuretic hormone that's supposed to reabsorb some water is not being secreted, or something has gone wrong with it, or is under secreted. Then you have the major water that the body needs, it will be released out of the kidney. So that is a major condition. Now we also have this oedema, which can be a disease or it can also be regarded as a symptoms. But it is when we have accumulation of large quantity of intracellular fluid in the tissue. The body is absorbing lots of water. Diuresis is that the kidney cannot retain water, is releasing out water. Now, when we have the body retaining lot of water, you have diuresis. You have swollen, we have oedema rather, swollen ankle and swollen feet. And you see that most pregnant women notice the swollen feet. But when you want to know if it is a kidney disease like the oedema, you press it down like this. So when you press it down like this and it's not coming up quickly, it's leaving a space like this, that means it's something we need to really take care of. This oedema is showing that the kidney is weak, is retaining lots of fluid than the body actually needs, which is dangerous. The waste has to be processed out of the body. So in this case, it's a great symptom that the kidney is malfunctioning. So the kidney failure, I haven't talked about all these diseases. The kidney might completely fail because of the chronic nephritis or other diseases. And by the time we have kidney failure, that means there are two way outs, either a dialysis or kidney transplant. Dialysis is like a machine. A machine is channeled with the kidney, with the body, that helps to remove the waste. So the machine performs the function of the kidney, but the machine is outside the body. So it removes the waste from the blood. What the kidney will do is what the dialysis machine will do. So they do that regularly to flush out waste from the body. It's usually very expensive, but that is what they do for renal patients. Now, this kidney transplant is trying to replant another kidney. Now, it said that one can live perfectly well with one kidney. But if the two kidney refuse to function, that means they have to maybe implant another kidney from another person. So they could do that surgery by fixing another kidney for normal functioning of the body. Let's talk about the liver. Remember that we've talked about the lungs, we've talked about the kidney, and now the liver. These organs, they are very key in performing maintaining a fairly constant internal environment, which we call homeostasis. So the liver, they has a pink bilobed organ. Just bilobe means two lobes, just below the diaphragm. I showed the diaphragm when I showed the liver, the lungs the other time. The diaphragm is the one that separates the upper abdomen from the lower abdomen. So the liver is just below the diaphragm. Then it is highly vascularized. That means it is very rich in blood vessel, which gives it its reddish color. So the liver main homeostatic function is to regulate the amount of nutrients which reach the blood and the body fluid. That is the liver does a lot of function, which we are going to talk about one after the other. But in general, it regulates the amount of nutrients which reach the blood and the tissue fluid. So this is achieved by absorbing and storing the nutrients which it receives and then release it into the circulatory system. So instead of releasing, by the time the nutrients that are coming to the liver, it receives it, it stores it, and release it in small amounts into the blood system. So it does not just release as it absorbs it. So it releases it in small amounts into the circulatory system so that the body circulates it to the necessary organ. So the function of the liver include regulation of blood sugar. It is a very key function of the liver. The regulation of protein, fat metabolism, storage of blood, removal of poison from the blood formation, breakdown of red blood cells, inactivation of hormones, and production of heat. All these functions are very important in the kidney, in the liver. So this is the structure of the liver. I have said it is bilobed. This is the liver, very close to the gallbladder. So the liver produces the bile that is stored in the gallbladder. We know that the bile is very necessary in digestion. It helps in the emulsification of fats. So this is the duodenum. This is the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. This is the pancreas. We'll still talk about this later. So by the time you open up the liver, you will see that it is highly vascularized, which I said it gives it its pink shape. In fact, the liver is the largest internal organ. When we talk about the internal organ, the liver is the largest internal organ, and it performs lots of functions. If it is external organ, then we talk about the skin as being the largest. But the internal organ, the liver is the largest internal organ. So let's take the function of the liver one after the other. First is regulation of blood sugar in the blood. Now, the normal glucose level in the blood is about 85 milligram per 100 centimeter cube of blood. So after a heavy meal of carbohydrates, when you take pounded yam, rice, or anything, the glucose level, the carbohydrate is broken down into glucose. So the glucose level will rise temporarily. And sometimes it might not even fall below the normal loss except during a prolonged starvation. So if the level of glucose falls below this, the brain cells become affected, leading to coma, because the brain cells need glucose. And by the time it falls below the normal, now I said that it is like 85, but by the time we eat a lot of carbohydrates, it temporarily rises. But when it falls down, then there will be a problem with the brain cells, leading to coma. Then, to avoid this from happening, the liver needs to control the blood glucose level and keep it within the normal range. And that is what we call homeostasis. It can perform that by the following mechanism that we talk about. The first is that the liver converts excess glucose in the blood to glycogen. On a normal day, I said that the liver is a very wise organ in the fact that everything that is being channeled into it, it doesn't release it at once. So when there is glucose, we eat a lot of food, it's broken down into glucose. The excess ones is being stored as glycogen in the liver. And this is stimulated by a type of hormone that is produced by the pancreas. By the time I'm talking about endocrine system, I will mention this pancreas again as both endocrine and exocrine gland. But now we are talking about pancreas as producing a particular hormone, insulin, which helps to convert excess glucose into glycogen. So that glycogen is stored into liver. But when the blood glucose is below the normal, the blood do not have enough glucose, then the liver reconverts the glycogen back to glucose. That is also done by another type of hormone that is called glucagon. That hormone is released from the pancreas too. So this insulin and glucagon, they are very important in regulating the control excess glucose. When there's excess glucose, insulin converts it back into glycogen, which is stored in the liver. When the glucose is below the normal, the glycogen then is reconverted. Maybe you are fasting, you have not eaten for 7 days. All the glycogen that has been stored as fat layer, they are being reconverted into glucose so that the body can have the necessary glucose. And that is done by the glycogen, which is the hormone that is released from the pancreas. So if the glycogen level in the liver is depleted, then the low glucose and the level of blood sensitize the hypothalamus. I'm mentioning hypothalamus again, which I said is a type of brain. So the hypothalamus stimulates the production of various hormones, some of which causes the liver to convert amino acids and glycerol stored in the liver into glucose. So alternatively, if there is no other way, the liver will always find a way, as long as it is stimulated by the hormones that will be induced by hypothalamus, to convert amino acid and glycerol into glucose. So by so doing, the liver will regulate the amount of blood sugar in the blood. So this is another function of the liver, which we say it is regulation of proteins. Amino acids are collected by the liver, which releases the requisite amount of amino acid into the general circulation. So the excess amino acid cannot be stored. We know that when we eat protein, we eat our whole chicken, the body takes the necessary amount. It cannot be stored in the body. Unlike glucose that excess will be stored into, amino acid cannot be stored. And but the liver now breaks it down into a less harmful substance, which we call the carboxylic compounds and amino compounds. So the amino compounds contain nitrogen, which is further converted to urea for the excretion by the kidney. You know, I said that the kidney excretes urea in the urine. So the liver is the one that converts the excess amino acid into urea, which is a less toxic substance to be excreted by the urine. The carbon compounds, it can also be converted into glucose, glycogen, or fat. So those two processes by which the liver converts excess amino acid into less harmful substance or useful substance like glycogen and fat is called deamination. So in short, I can say that deamination is the breakdown or conversion of excess amino acid into ammonia and finally to urea and other compounds like glycogen and fats that I've already mentioned. So the liver also manufactures proteins in order to regulate protein in the body. It can also manufacture some protein that is found in the plasma from the amino acid derived from the digestion of proteins. So the kind of protein that the liver can manufacture is albumin, the globulin, and the fibrinogen. The fibrinogen is necessary for blood clotting. So these are the plasma proteins that the liver itself can manufacture from amino acid. Another function of the liver is fat metabolism. So the liver breaks down lipids into glucose. I said the other time that during starvation, that the liver can go into the fatty part of the body and convert the glycogen back to glucose. So it can break down lipids to produce glucose. If required by the body, then the excess lipids are transferred to fat storage part of the body. Then the liver also can convert excess glucose to glycogen And when the glycogen storing capacity is exceeded, the liver converts the glycogen into fat. Then the liver manufactures bile, which is stored in the gallbladder. The bile contains organic salt and cholesterol bilirubin. Vitamins and minerals are also essential for good health, and they can also be stored in the liver. The soluble vitamins are vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K.